when I see the number of agents that are not investing or are not utilizing midterm rentals or any type really of rental or investment strategy, I'm like, oh, but you're right there. You're like 90% of the way to the finish. Like you guys have all the knowledge that us non-agents, like we buy the books, we listen, we're like trying to get all of the knowledge that's in you guys' heads and like you have it. So it's, oh, you're right. You're right there. It's truly, it's also a strategy that's easy to pivot in and out of if you need to, right? If you take a long-term rental and you want to try it as a midterm rental, try it. You can always transition it back if you decide you don't like it, but I bet you won't.
If you're a real estate agent earning $200,000 a year and you want to grow your passive income, this show is for you. Learn secrets other agents use and hear from experts in our field who will guide you on your journey to investing in assets like apartment communities so you can take your commissions and turn them into cash flow. Here's your host, Randal. Let's dive in.
Hey, welcome back. I have an awesome guest on today. Her name is Katie Lyon. She is the marketing director for Furnished Finders. So we've talked about Furnished Finders multiple times on the show in passing when I've been talking to short-term and midterm rental operators. And I wanted to bring somebody on from the company to discuss the company and kind of what they offer and some of the things that they do, because it's a pretty awesome program. And if you're not investing or not familiar with midterm rentals, then let your ears perk up and learn a little bit today. I know you're going to get something out of the show. So if you would go on, rate and review, leave us a comment, and the stars is fantastic, but the comments help us a ton to get great guests like Katie on the show. Just a quick bit of background. She spent over 10 years in real estate and marketing industries. She's currently marketing director for Furnished Finders. She's a landlord herself. We talk about her properties that she manages and how she's come across those. So we talk about the investing. Cool little note that she touches on just briefly. She served as the advertising chair for Honda and Adventure, leading a team in developing and executing an integrated marketing campaign for the 2008 Honda Accord Coupe. It's pretty cool. So anyway, we have a great conversation. Again, if you're getting something out of the show, go on, rate and review. Appreciate it. Let's jump into the conversation with Katie. Hey, Katie, thanks for joining the show. Let's go ahead. I wanted to ask you about your marketing experience. But before we do that, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what Furnished Finders is for those who don't know what Furnished Finders is. Like I said, I was a noob and I didn't know how awesome you guys are, but now I do. So go ahead and tell us what you guys do.
Yeah. So Furnished Finder is an online marketplace where tenants can find furnished stays for 30 days or more. And on the flip side of that, landlords can post their properties for 30 days or more. The main difference between us and say an Airbnb or a Vrbo is that we are not a direct booking site. So it's a lead generation site. So we are heavy believers in direct booking. And we give landlords all of the leads that come in for their area. We also give tenants the opportunity to connect with landlords directly. And then between the two of you, you get to do a tenant screening, sign a lease, collect a deposit, all of those amazing things. But it's all 30 days and up. So our focus is on midterm. So less than a long term, but definitely more than your traditional Airbnb short-term rental stay.
Okay. A couple questions. How do you monetize that? Are you guys a advertising platform essentially? So if I want to list my property as a landlord, then I'm paying you regardless of if it books or not?
Yep. So there's an annual subscription fee.
Okay.
It's $149 per year to list the property. And then you can get as many bookings as you want. It's up to you what you do with those leads and how you use the platform. But we've got millions of travelers every year on there searching and sending out housing requests, we call them, where they're essentially saying, here's where I want to stay. Does anybody have something that can fit my needs? But yeah, we keep it one flat fee to put your property on there annually.
As a traveling nurse, I need to find a place in Boise or whatever, wherever the heck I'm going. How do I have to pay the platform for the right to look? Okay. That's cool.
No. And as a traveler, you can look on there and you can search the map and you can connect directly with a specific landlord. They can search the map and they can say, oh, Joe Smith has this property. I want to be there. They can message you, text you, email you, call you. We don't restrict communications just to the platform. It can be however you want or are comfortable. Yeah. Or you can put out what's called a housing request, whereas you might say, hey, I'm going to Boise. I need a 3-bed. I have a pet. Here's my budget. Here's my dates. And then we will send that to all of the landlords who have properties that are within the realm of those needs to see what can be a fit.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that's cool. That's a good system. The other question I had is there a trend? Like, what's the majority of the tenant base? Like, what are you guys seeing, and is it corporate housing partially? Is it traveling nurses?
Yeah,
Is what I
when
hear a
we
lot of people
started,
talking about.
our focus was 100% travel nurses. That's actually what got us into to the midterm rental market, but that's changed significantly, especially after COVID. So we've got still a good chunk are travel nurses, but you still have corporate housing, you've got traveling academic, or you've got academics, professors, you've got digital nomads, you have relocating families, you've got even down to things like grandparents who want to be close to their grandkids for the summer, right? Insurance claims. In this market, you
Oh,
get
yeah.
a lot of families who are maybe they sold their house, but they're not ready to buy yet, or it's taking them longer to find whatever house that they're looking for, things like that. So there's really all sorts of use cases. Personally, I actually have 9 midterm rentals with my family. After I started working at Furnished Finder, I realized how cool this all is and jumped in as a landlord. And we have a lot of smaller properties. So we do have a lot of traveling medical professionals, but then we also get people going to visit family or students, interns. There's all sorts of use cases, even though you might not think about it for the 30 days and up.
Okay, so I want to talk about that in a second
Yeah.
because I want to break down the unit types and like what you
Yeah.
would recommend. But let's go back. I want to talk
Sure.
about Katie. All right, Katie. So you're in marketing, right?
Yep.
You are the head of marketing for Furnished Finders. Is that correct? Yep.
Yeah. I'm the marketing director.
Marketing
Yep.
director. Okay. So how did you go from like your background? I know you worked on the 2008 Honda, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you went
Yep.
from that, the corporate world into real estate and still working in the marketing side of things. Just give me the 30,000 foot view of how you got from just marketing into marketing and real estate.
Yeah, sure. So I went to school for marketing, started out just doing marketing in general, and then I ended up working at a private equity commercial real estate investment firm for about 10 years and did marketing there, but also ended up learning real estate 101, but from a commercial real estate perspective, which has a lot of similarities, but also a lot of differences, as you guys all know. And then I had the opportunity to join the Furnished Finder team, and that seemed like a really great fit since I was familiar with real estate in general, but also really liked working with companies that are on a big growth path and have a lot in their future, right? Like a lot of possibility and potential. And just then, since then, I've really gone into the deep end with the real estate. Like I said, like we've gotten all these rentals. We've had one long-term rental for a few years as well. So it's all just felt like a very natural fit. And it's felt getting to know the residential real estate side has felt very natural to me. I think since I had all that experience in the commercial side, but this just is so much more customer oriented and you're working with these travelers and stuff. So it's been a really great fit. I love combining the two because I think at the core, right, marketing and real estate is like you're serving people, right? You're solving these problems. You're trying to figure out how to make things better and things work for everyone. So I really enjoy combining the two.
Nice. All right. Thanks for the background. I have to ask then
Yeah.
on the CRE side. So you worked for a PE firm, and what kind of assets were they going after?
So it's mainly strip malls.
Strip mall. Okay. You
Mm-hmm.
didn't work for strip mall guy, did you?
Nope.
Is that the beginning of that, guys? Okay.
No, nope. It's a small firm in Denver and they did some great things, grew really big.
Yeah.
Well, not really big, but really fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I saw the potential here with Furnished Finder and just loved seeing what they were doing.
Yeah. The only reason I asked selfishly on the commercial side is what was working. I know this is some time ago, but for private equity, you're marketing for the investors, correct, to come into the
Correct.
fund or to invest.
Correct.
And then you're also marketing for the properties. And so
Right.
which side were you on when you were both? Okay. Yeah, yeah.
So I was
So
on both and yeah, it's very different because you're marketing out to really high-end investors trying to get them into the fund. And then, yeah, for the property side as well, making sure that those kind of maintain their quality and occupancy and things like that. So, yeah.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't have to dive too deep into that.
Yeah.
I could geek out on that a little bit, but that's all right. Well, let's move on to the furnished. Okay, so you were with them and then you moved into furnished furniture. When did you actually buy your first property? How did that come about?
Our first property was a little bit of, it was our primary residence.
Okay.
And then we went to build the house that I'm in now. And part of the contract with the new build was that you had to have your old house on the market within 7 days of signing the initial contract, which meant
For the loan?
yeah, as a part of the contract to buy the house. And
Okay.
so essentially that meant that you had to live in an apartment or some sort of temporary housing for the 9 months to a year that it was taking to build the house. We have 2 young kids, we've got pets, and we were like, that is a hard pass for us. Now, I didn't know about Furnished Finder at the time. This would have been the perfect use case for Furnished Finder because we could have found a furnished place, but we ended up finding a little loophole in their contract where if you kept your house, your residence, and you leased it out, all you had to do was show a signed lease within 7 days of closing. So that meant that we could stay in the house. So we
Lease
did
it to
that.
yourself or something.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
we actually we had a lease, just it was for after our move-in date here.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
So kind of, and that turned into our rental, and everybody told us we were crazy. What happens when the toilet gets plugged at midnight or something breaks or you have bad tenants? And we were like, listen, it's going to be fine. And it's been amazing. We've been renting that house for coming up on 3 years now.
Okay.
That's our only long-term rental, but it's been great. And that kind of was like our foot into the door of, hey, this landlord thing is doable.
Yeah. So this was 2020, give or take. 2020.
Yeah, right around
Okay.
there. Yep.
Okay. So that was your first in, and now you have
Mhm.
what, 9 doors? Is that what I heard you
Now
say?
we have technically 11, but one of them we're working on doing a seller finance deal on. So I just call it 10.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk
Yeah.
about that too then. I like seller
Yeah.
finance. We have
Yeah.
a whole crowd fund set up to do on our finance
Oh,
deals.
nice. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So you bought that, or the way you moved in, you did a deal.
A little bit of a reverse house
Yeah,
hack or something. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And so that deal, so that's your long-term rental. And then you have 9 other short-term, midterm,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. We've got 9 midterms. Yep.
Okay. So look, let's talk about when you transitioned from the short-term, or from your long-term, why did you go to the midterm rental? Like, how did you even come about that? Did you start buying your midterm rentals once you started
Yeah.
working for Furnished Finders? Is that how that came about?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Initially, we wanted to, and I say we because it's me, my husband, and my family, my mom, brother, and sister. We all do this together.
Okay.
We wanted to get a short-term rental because we wanted to get more cash flow, things like that. So that's actually was the intention that we bought a house in Florida with. That's now the one that we're working on a seller finance deal for.
Okay.
But then we ended up not furnishing it. And then simultaneously, I was getting started at Furnished Finder and becoming aware of midterm rentals. And the whole time we were planning on doing a short-term rental with the Florida property, we were a little intimidated, right? Because we were like, this is going to be a lot of management. There's going to be a lot of turnover. The risk feels really high. And we were all okay with it, but it just wasn't like ideal. And then I'm starting to work at Furnished Finder and I'm starting to realize all the potential of midterms. And I was like, why are we not doing this? It felt like a much better fit because all of us have full-time jobs. We all can't sit and be managing short-term rentals all the time. It felt more stable. It felt like you still get good cash flow because it was feeling really hard to find a long-term rental that would cash flow. So it felt like the perfect fit. And I was seeing it day to day, like all day when I would be at work. So we got our first property as an arbitrage. That one did really well. And then we just literally have not stopped since. So all of our midterm rentals are in the Midwest where my family's from. They're the boots on the ground for us, but we've literally just been like, okay, we did this one. It's killing it. Let's go again. And we've been able to really systemize things, and Furnished Finder has kept us full. Like we have tenants in every property. I don't know our occupancy rate per se, but like when we have an opening, it's for a couple days.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
actually
pretty solid for that.
It's awesome. I actually had over the winter, I had people who were waiting for one of my units and I put them in another unit to hold them till there was like a waiting room game.
Nice.
So yeah, it's been really cool because now not only do I get to work at Furnished Finder and talk about the product and work on it, but I get to see it as a user, right? So I'm sitting here using it day to fill these properties and it's doing the job, right? So it's just really great.
All right, I'm like 30 questions popping up, right? That my
Yeah,
pad's
that's
getting
good.
full. All right, so let's go and just high level. Sounds one like you either know the property type that you should be buying. That's one question. What makes a great midterm rental property, right? You mentioned nurses maybe gravitate towards a smaller condo or something that's
Right.
easier to manage. So if you could break down maybe those either the
Sure.
property types or maybe what you have done specifically that keeps you
Yeah.
full all the time.
Yeah. So I think it's all about your approach and your kind of investment theory, right? What me and my family have decided is that we want to go about it like a pyramid. Like we're going to build a base of smaller properties that all have lower costs. And that way, if we do have a vacancy, it's less of a hit, and then slowly build up to larger, more expensive properties. Because then, if we have a larger property that's vacant, we have these smaller ones on the base that can financially support it. So it doesn't feel like as big of a hit. I know a lot of people that don't do that because they want to have the maximum amount of cash flow per property and they go straight for the larger properties. There really is demand for every size. I always say to think of it coincidentally like a pyramid where if you have your studio, 1, 2 baths, 1, 2 bedrooms, you're going to have the most inventory of those on Furnished Finder and kind of in Midterm Rentals in general. You're also going to have the most demand as you get higher and higher. Let's say you reach the point of a 4 bed, 5 bed, there's a lot less inventory. There's also a lot less demand, but they really correlate pretty well. It's just the use cases are different. But I think next up, we're going to be trying more of the larger property. And I'm excited for that because it will be more cash flow, less work because it's a larger property. But it just depends on what tenant type you're going for, right?
That's the
Traveling medical professionals, they don't need a whole ton of space. A relocating family, an insurance placement, someone who's waiting to close on their next house or still house hunting, they're going to want a larger property. So it just depends on what you're going for, what your market is, and how you see yourself fitting in that puzzle.
okay. And are you marketing these properties only on Furnished Finder? And if so, then what are you doing? Because I don't know the rating system. I should have gone on
Yeah.
and actually taken a look.
Yeah.
But are there metrics for the landlord similar to Air DNA, right? Like, how do
Right.
I know as a landlord if I put my 4 bed, 2 bath on, what am I going to be able to lease that thing for?
Yes, there are. So let me answer your first question. I do have my properties listed on Airbnb more for kind of research purposes,
Mhm.
but I think about honestly all of my current tenants right now are from Furnished Finder.
Okay.
It's so much less expensive. I don't pay any fees or commissions when I get a booking, and the traveler doesn't either. And what people don't think about is like on Airbnb, the landlord pays 3 to 5% commission
Yeah.
to them, but the traveler also has a separate fee. When you're going on vacation and you go to the checkout and there's whatever they call it, the fee, it's a lot.
A
And
lot of
they
them.
have to include that in their budget. So even then, though that's not directly coming out of your pocket as a property owner or an investor, it really indirectly is because the traveler has to budget for that.
Yeah.
So that has become huge for me in my business. I'm like, I want to book direct, like
Yeah.
when it's at all humanly possible. But on Furnished Finder, we have a stats page. It's furnishedfinder.com/stats.
Okay.
You can get there through the navigation too, but you can put in your market and get some basic data points. But I always tell people as well, like midterm rental research is a lot more Sherlock Holmes than it is data, right? It's getting into the map. Go onto Furnished Finder and search the map as if you were your ideal traveler, right? Like if you're going for digital nomads and medical professionals, look at, okay, what are the studio 1 or 2 beds in your area? Do they appear to be available? Do they appear to be booked? What's the price like? What are the furnishings like? Get in there and really connect some dots. And same thing, like if you're looking at a bigger property. So I always do that. I use the stats page a lot, but there's also just like a lot of inferences and dots you can connect with looking at the map.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just didn't know because it's self-booking, then that data
Exactly.
isn't, it's self-reporting if it's reported at all. So it's
Right.
there's no sold comps or rental comps rents, it's
Yeah.
all active on the market that you're looking at. So
Yeah. So like I'll go on the map and I'll look and I'll say that, okay, if I see a property that's in a similar location and it's similar price, similar furnishings to what I would have, you'll see the availability date and I'll say, hey, if the availability date isn't for 2 months, it's a safe assumption for me that there's a tenant in there. So
yeah,
I'll use that as a good comp.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
that's
just, you
solid.
just got to get a little more creative with it.
Yeah, yeah, no, good advice on how to
Yeah.
use the system. So let me ask you this then. So with your background in digital marketing, and what tools are you using to not just market, but I guess on the other side, now that you have tenants, like what tools are you using to book them, to manage the
Mm-hmm.
property, to collect rents?
Mm-hmm.
Break down some of that so that anybody listening would be able to go and replicate what you've done.
Yeah. I will say one of the things that intimidated me about short-term rentals was how there's 400,000 softwares out there and they all do different things or all the things. And it was a part of the feeling of overwhelm for me. What I like about midterm rentals is it's like way, way simpler. Furnished Finder has a sister company called KeyCheck that I use, and that is for tenant screenings. Renters can get renters insurance through there. You can get customizable leases through there. So I always refer to it as like the landlord's toolbox because sometimes with a direct booking, especially if you're new to it, you can say, okay, hey, I found the tenant. Like we agreed on the dates, the price, the deposit, all these things. But now what do I do? And we don't want to leave you lost in the woods. So we give you KeyCheck as a tool. There's the prices on there for the tools are very reasonable, but a tenant screening for a midterm rental is standard. I always tell my tenants or tenant leads that it's the equivalent of an application fee.
Yeah.
And then I like the customizable leases. I get an actual digital lease for every tenant that I have because again, it's not a weekend. It's the average stay is like 90 to 100 days and sometimes it's a lot longer.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have those documents. But as far as the management, like I'm a big proponent of keeping things as simple as I can. So I use an Excel spreadsheet or a Monday board, but these tenants when they get in there, they make themselves at home, right? You're not going to be dealing with requests every day of, oh, the towel is dirty, or I don't know, all the things that pop in my head if you have a short-term rental. Like they come in, they might need help getting settled a little bit, and then they live there, right? They're not visiting, they're living there.
Yeah.
So most of my tenants, I don't really hear from, and just because they're good. So it's like a whole different level of management. We have a tenant tracker once you're a Furnished Finder customer, you get a landlord dashboard with all your tools. We have a tenant tracker there as well. That's really nice to just keep track of who's where, move in, move out, things like that. But it doesn't have to be crazy complicated, which I really like because it just makes the barrier of entry feel so much lower.
Yeah. All right. So then let me ask you this. Because I've got rentals, right? And I've had rentals.
Yeah.
So turnover is always a thing, right? You lose money every single time I have a tenant turn because you're painting, you're doing something. So again, going back to the types of assets that you're buying and acquiring, are you buying new properties that need very little maintenance, or are you fixing them up fully right when you buy them so that you have no issues, or hopefully you limit the amount of capital expense that you have going forward? Like, what are you doing in order to mitigate some of the turnover costs when
Yeah.
you have more turnover happening on an annual basis?
Our portfolio has a mix of everything. We have everything from arbitrage properties where when the fridge breaks, I don't have to pay for it. I literally call the other landlord,
Yeah.
and we found some really great partners for that. We have a 3-bed, 3-bath townhouse that we bought. It was built in the 60s. It had recently gotten new carpet and paint, but it didn't have a microwave. The door handles were like crazy shiny gold. It needed all new light fixtures. It needed new bathroom vanities, but it was like very much like a surface level
Yeah.
facelift. We didn't knock it down any walls. We just made it a little bit more in this millennium. And then we have a condo that was built in the 90s and is totally fine. We don't have anything, we haven't bought any like new construction for rental purposes, but it could totally work. What's nice is you can get in there every 3, 4, 5 months, right? Sometimes shorter. It just depends on the lease time. But what I like about that is twofold. Like my cleaner, when she goes in there, can give me a heads up on something before it becomes a big deal. right? My tenants also will let me know, hey, the AC is starting to struggle or whatever it is. So I hear about things before they reach the point of being a lot more expensive typically. And I also don't have people moving furniture in and out all the time, which helps.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, compared to a short-term rental, I don't have people who are just not as careful with the property because they don't care as much. They're there for a weekend, for a vacation, and they're harder on the property just by nature. So there's a good enough amount of turnover for me to feel really comfortable as far as knowing what's going on in the property, and I don't have surprises, but the wear and tear is very manageable.
Got it. Okay. You mentioned arbitrage.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know, arbitrage, what, you have an agreement with the owner of the property, or are you the owner and they have an agreement with you?
Nope, they are the owner.
Okay.
And
So then
yep.
you can break it down. Go ahead. Explain it.
Yeah. So they are the owner and I rented from them and they know exactly what I'm doing. I've told them like very transparently
But
what
you're
we're doing
renting
with
on
the
a
property.
long term, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So we have a 2-year lease and then we furnished it and then we present it as a midterm rental to tenants.
Awesome. Okay.
So it's great. It's a win for them because we pay on time every single month. Like,
Yeah.
we're taking really good care of the place. I gave them copies of the professional pictures they can use. They know it's getting cleaned by a professional every few months. And the particular one we're partnering with, they really like that we're able to help some of these medical professionals in particular that are coming to serve their community. And it's great for me because I don't have to have a down payment to get another property, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to grow the portfolio quickly.
Yeah. All right. So then let's talk about this. I have on here, what's the cost to furnish standard, and does Furnished Finders actually have like, hey, here's your itemized list of things you should probably have in a property, or is there any kind of resource? I'm sure there's a resource like that out there.
There are resources. I would suggest everybody Google it. There's some great people out there. I know Sarah Weaver has a list, but also you can literally take a list for a short-term rental and just pare it down because you don't need the board games and the puzzles and the seasonal decor and things like that. You need extra blankets and extra sheets, and you need like a baking pan. And I have my own list that we've used time and time again. And what I like when we were making it, I would just go through my day and I'm like, okay, what am I touching that if I were in a rental, I would expect to be there, right? Like a desk. I would want a desk to be there. Kitchen utensils and things like that. I was like, okay, what would I expect to be there and what would be like a plus? The other nice thing is I always tell my tenants when they're moving in, I'm like, hey, if there's something that you use on a regular basis that I don't have in there, let me know and I'll get it for you.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you use it regularly, someone else would probably use it regularly as well. I think I've had a toaster come up and a teapot, and I'm like, cool, I'll send them to you on Amazon. Like, they'll be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Cost wise, it's definitely less than short term because, like I said, like you don't need all the frills. I would say for a studio apartment, I typically spend about $4,000, maybe $5,000.
Okay.
And then just scaling that up, our 3-bedroom, 3-bath, I want to say cost probably 8. But I also I don't do a lot of extra frills, but I want to make sure there's a really good mattress in there and blackout curtains. And I want to make sure that the kitchen you've got everything you need. So it's more about quality than quantity because these travelers too, sometimes if you think about a family who's in between homes or on an insurance placement or something, they're probably going to come with some suitcases, right?
Yeah.
Like their kid's going to come with their favorite blanket and some of their clothes, and you're spending more money on like clothing storage than decor. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. And obviously the TVs and couches and basic furniture and that sort of stuff that's going in there.
Yep.
So 4 to 8. All right. Yeah, that's interesting. We have on ours, I talked to somebody I'd interviewed here on the podcast and talked to them. And then through some other people, they're like, okay, I have this property. I'm thinking about moving out. We're going to move into this new house. Here's my address, gave it to them. And then they gave me an estimate of what it was going to rent for. And it was like 3 times what I would have gotten on a short term or like a normal lease, like a long-term lease. Yeah. And so that's the other question. Like, what are you seeing typical if you had to rent any of your properties out on a long-term lease? Obviously, you're making money on an arbitrage deal. So you know what the long-term would go for, and you're making money on that. What are you seeing is average, perhaps, increase over what long-term rentals would go for?
It's very market dependent. It's very market dependent. And you have to look at your specific market. My goal with an arbitrage is always to double the rent that I pay. And I get close to, if not match that every time. But part of a midterm rental is you cover utilities. So I'm going to double the rent, but then I'm paying utilities, I'm paying internet.
Yeah.
But that is my goal. My personal investment goal is always to double it. Now, in some markets, that's not quite possible. I tell people as a rule of thumb to go with 1.5 to 2 times long-term rent.
Okay.
Now, if you get like an insurance placement or you have a much larger property, you might blow that number out of the water. You might get 3 to 4 times, right? Because those are high needs and low inventory, so they're going to pay more. If you have a small property somewhere where long-term rents are really high, you might not reach that number, and that's okay. So it just really depends on the market, the size of the property, and also what amenities do you have with it? Is there free parking? Are you pet friendly? Those are all things that people are searching for.
Okay. All right. Good to know. So then let's tie it into the agents, right? So what advice would you give to real estate agents who we have line of sight into properties all the time?
Yeah.
You've invested in multiple markets. So just in general, what advice would you give to real estate agents who may be thinking about dipping their toe in the water and getting started in midterm rentals?
My biggest thing is it's not difficult to get started, right? Like it is very much not difficult, especially if you have market knowledge and you have, like you said, line of sight into properties day in and day out. Like it's very attainable. And there are so many tenants that are searching for places to be. It's so much less demanding than a short-term rental. And there really is so much potential there. When I see the number of agents that are not investing or are not utilizing midterm rentals or any type really of rental or investment strategy, I'm like, oh, but you're right there. You're like 90% of the way to the finish. Like you guys have all the knowledge that us non-agents, like we buy the books, we listen, we are like trying to get all of the knowledge that's in you guys' heads and like you have it. So it's, oh, you're right. You're right there. It's also a strategy that's easy to pivot in and out of if you need to, right? If you take a long-term rental and you want to try it as a midterm rental, try it. You can always transition it back if you decide you don't like it, but I bet you won't. So it's just, there's so much there. And I am always shocked at how many agents are not just giving it a go, right?
Yeah. 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 Go out, do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's awesome. I want to ask you one more thing about your podcast. So I know you're
Yeah.
co-host of the Landlord Diaries podcast. Awesome. You should go check it out. And so I want to know, obviously you have talked to a lot of landlords on that. So what are some of the
Yeah.
most valuable lessons that you've learned from some of the conversations that you've had there?
Yeah. So on the podcast, we talk to midterm rental landlords of literally any size. So if they have a room they rent out in their house, or if they have a portfolio of 100 rentals, we just discuss. And I think one of the main lessons that I take away from it personally as an investor is like, you can analyze something all day long, but sometimes you have to just try it and you can pivot and you can figure it out. And the other thing is that there's a lot of resources out there for midterm rentals. Like it's not always thought of firsthand with real estate investing, but once you dive into the land of midterm rentals, there's so many resources and so many people that are supportive. Like for each of my properties, I only need on average like 3 or 4 tenants a year. So I'm like, I don't need to gatekeep. I don't need to protect any like trade secrets. I like it if I have other people that I can point to. I don't have vacancy, but that person might. But yeah, I think also at its core, we talked to a lot of guests that remind us that it's still a hospitality and a service business, right? Like you're trying to solve these people's needs, particularly with midterms. People are traveling because of a need much more often than a want. So you're working with them and you get to create really good relationships and say, okay, how can my problem help I have a tenant right now who's staying there because her mom is on hospice and it's close. It's really close to the facility. And it's okay. How can I help you in your situation? A traveling medical professional. Okay. How can I use this property as a tool for you? And all the way up to large properties. So it's just remembering that frame of mind and that you're serving these people in somewhere where they've got this need to fill. It puts your mind in the right direction.
Yeah, that's solid.
Thanks.
Yeah, it is. I'm often curious about that to see how much of a hospitality business it is and how many calls you're getting and that sort of thing. But
right.
It sounds as though it's a lot less. And you're not the only one that said this. I've had conversations with other operators who own their properties, and they say the exact same thing. They say it's on a comparative basis. If you're looking at a short-term rental compared to midterm, I'm not getting the calls about X, whatever it is. That's a lot easier deal to do.
It's a lot.
I really appreciate you jumping on, sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
With me. Yeah, catching up, telling me about Furnished Finders and what you're working on these days. If you would like to catch up with Katie, I'm going to leave all your contact information in the show notes. So by all means, reach out and go check out Furnished Finders. And we'll catch you guys on the next episode.
Did you know that 80% of the agents we speak with got into real estate in order to gain passive income so they could obtain financial freedom and become work optional? If you want to stay up to date, the best way is to make sure you're subscribed. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and do it now. We'll catch you on the next episode.